Smoak.
August 30th of 2007, the Big Ten Network began. And Bob Thompson, who's been a part of our show many, many times, former Fox president, has been a consultant for many people when it comes to college athletics and TV deals, or with us when it comes to so much realignment. He joins us on 365 Sports. Bob, thank you, with Paul and Craig and David Smoak. So when the Big Ten Network launched, did you guys have any idea, Jim Delaney, you and others, that it would become as big as it was?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me again, guys. Pleasure to be here. When we pulled that lever, we were just happy there was a signal. And it worked marvelously. So I don't know that we had any premonition of, I think we knew it would work. I'm not sure we thought it would ultimately be as much of a game changer as it turned out to be. And you can sit here now, 16 years later, and say that. And if you look at some of the changes that were brought about, some might say some good, some bad, but it was definitely an agent of change. And that's probably what we didn't recognize at that time.
There are, varying levels of success when other people tried to copy the model. The Pac-12 obviously famously didn't work because they tried to maybe reinvent the wheel a little bit too much. The SEC network and ACC network seem fine. The Longhorn network's going away. The Big 12 never really had a proper one. Why do you think some of those work and some of them didn't, if they had your model to follow?
Well, it's interesting because once we announced the Big Ten Network, my phone was ringing off the hook, and I got a call from every other commissioner out there from the Power Fives, and they all looked at it, and we made our pitch to all of them. A lot of it depended on where they were in their existing rights deals, and they couldn't really pry themselves apart from those existing deals to necessarily start a channel along at the same time the Big Ten was going forward. And then ultimately, a number of them looked at different models, some with a partner, some without, in the case of the Pac-12. And certainly the ones that ended up working, the joint venture, say, between Fox and Big Ten, and the revenue share type setup with the ACC and the SEC, where ESPN owns the network, but the conferences are profit participants. And then in the case of the Pac-12, we decided to go alone, and we know how that ends up. And then the Big 12 was a little bit of a different situation because many of those schools had existing third-party deals for their third-tier rights. And then you had the Longhorn Network kind of hanging out there over everybody's head, and Oklahoma had a pretty profitable situation as well. So they decided, and to this day, I've never really launched a network. They have a very robust Big 12, as you guys know, Big 12, setup on ESPN Plus that I think has served them very well.
Bob, how impressed are you, or what are your thoughts on just the way the Big Ten's been able to spread itself out, whether it be from, obviously the geography footprint that they now have going all the way to the West Coast starting next year, but also the networks that they're on, the size of the Big Ten network. It's all set up quite well, is it not?
It's certainly grown to a point I never believed I'd see it. Someone asked me the other day if I ever thought I'd see a University of Oregon game where I went to school on the Big Ten network. Yeah. I can certainly say no. I never thought I would see that, but they have made themselves a national conference, and I think they did it for the reasons that they felt were important. And people can agree with that or disagree with it, but from a television standpoint, I think they have a very NFL type model. They have three networks, a linear cable network with FS1, their own conference channel with BTN, and some streaming deals with Peacock and Paramount Plus. So they've got their fingers in every piece of the pie, and I think that's an important place to be right now. And that the conferences that do that are going to be the conferences that continue to succeed and advance in the years to come.
Bob, back to the Big 12 and trying to figure out their Tier 3. What was the story? Were there schools that were just dead against a Big 12 type network? And was it Oklahoma and Texas because they had their own, or was it maybe others like Nebraska or A&M that didn't quite understand it? What happened there?
Well, I think for years everybody had their own kind of pretty good deals, and some of them were with the Fox RSNs, like the case of Oklahoma, and the Longhorn Network was moving along towards its launch. Nebraska had a deal. Kansas had a really good basketball deal that brought them some money. So everybody had a deal of some sort or another, and they had some years to go, and it would have been difficult to extricate them from some of those deals and buy them out. One of the good things about the Big Ten network was that, Delaney had kind of given everybody notice that you need to have, the ability to either terminate deals or don't renew deals beyond a certain point. If we're going to go forward with this network, we got to have the right. And so that was very helpful. And in the case of the Big 12, it wasn't quite that simple. And not everybody, I don't need to name names, but not everybody was aligned with the process going forward as to should there be a channel or not be a channel.
Gee, I wonder who that was. There'll always be a mystery.
You didn't want to name names, but
no.
But okay, well, Bob, let me ask you. I'll follow it up. Does Texas take too much heat for the Longhorn Network and not allowing the Big 12 network? Because I sometimes wonder if that's just lazy narrative, or is that the case?
Well, it would have been very difficult to do a Big 12 network without the Texas product.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
If they weren't in, we weren't real interested, and we looked at the Longhorn Network, and I spent a fair amount of time with the Loss and Chris trying to figure out if it was something that worked for us. And at the end of the day, they got a pretty blow away offer from ESPN, and we took our little bag and went home.
Bob, you worked a lot with Jim Delaney, and he was someone who I think people will remember a little bit differently depending on how you felt about what he did in college football. But there is no mistaking that he was a mover and a shaker. I think a lot of people think of him as kind of against postseason expansion and maybe a little old school there, but he was clearly an innovator in other ways. What kind of impact lasting when people take the 10, 15 years from now about what Jim Delaney really meant for this era of college football?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, he was very, very passionate about the product in the Big Ten itself, but in collegiate athletics as well. I mean, he played basketball at North Carolina. He, worked in a variety of areas within college sports, and certainly always had, I believe, the sports best, college sports best interest at heart. Some people might say, well, he was an obstructionist as it relates to the playoff system, and he was too wedded to the Rose Bowl and all these things. But look, at the end of the day, when there was a structure that he felt was workable, he was right behind it all the way. And so I think he's certainly an innovator. He was a bit of a risk taker, calculated risk. He was a very, very excellent consensus builder. I mean, his ability to hold those conference presidents together while we were doing hand-to-hand combat, they're trying to get the Big Ten network launched, was amazing. And, we had some very tense meetings with some presidents after that first year, right before the start of the second football season. Were we going to get our carriage taken care of? And fortunately we did by the start of that second season, and things, took off from there. But his ability to, keep the ADs in line, coaches in line, and build a consensus that this was the right thing for the conference to do is something that I think will live on. And as I said, the changes that this channel or this network brought about, if you look at collegiate sports now, it's really amazing.
What are your thoughts on what's trying to be figured out right now in terms of the ACC and the remaining, not all four remaining Pac schools, but Cal and Stanford? I mean, obviously there's, the conditions as far as pro rata and the money and all of that, but you've seen kind of all the scuttlebutt that's out there right now. What are your thoughts when you see the arrangement that they're trying to work on here?
Well, I think we're getting close to the end here. If we can, find a home for these the four orphans, so to speak, of the Pac-12, I think it sounds like Stanford and Cal are headed for the ACC along with SMU. Whether that's because the ACC really wants them, or they're looking to potentially, add a few Power 5 schools that are floating around in case at some point they need to backfill. They lose a couple of schools who get real comfortable with pulling out of the ACC. I'm not sure it's that easy, but certainly it's a decent insurance policy. And then with the other two, Oregon State, Washington State, figure out, is it a AAC? Is it a MWC? Is it a combination? Is it a merger, reverse merger, whatever? What's going to happen to all the credits, NCAA credits, Pac-12 assets, things like that. Then we should go pretty quiet. I don't see a lot of movement until the next round of TV deals, which, 2030 is when the Big Ten's up, so they'll probably start a couple years early. I'm really interested to see and understand there was a meeting today how the new CFT plays out. What is it going to be instead of 6-6? Is it going to be 5-7? They've got to do something with some of the games that are floating around still from a TV standpoint. And then I think we get to play a couple of years under the new conference structure and the new CFP playoff, and we can kind of see how it goes, and then what changes might take place, as we get towards the end of the decade, which will be here. Everything starts a couple years out, so we're really looking about 4 or 5 years down the road.
Bob, in the end, with Oregon, Washington, Big Ten, 4 schools to the Big 12, and perhaps California, Stanford to the ACC, all that money that's being spent on pro rata and from Fox or ESPN or whoever, in the end, wasn't that basically the kind of money that the Pac-12 could have had a year ago?
Yes, that's pretty much it. It's and it's interesting because markets will always go to the right level. And I said back in October or July of 22 that they're worth $300 million and for 10 schools, and that's what ESPN bid. And ultimately, that's what 8 of the 10 schools are going to get. So there was certainly some sanity to the market, and I don't think anyone went overboard paying for those schools. I think Fox and some people would have been, and probably ESPN might have been very happy for the Pac-12 to still be around and have ESPN paying them $300 million a year, or have Apple take the product, because of some of these contractual obligations, Fox and ESPN ended up, pulling up another couple $100 million that they wouldn't have otherwise paid if the rights had just been to Apple or somebody along those lines. So I think the market played itself out correctly, and the value that many people thought was the value that was ultimately achieved by the Pac-12 schools. But I think they just had a misplay, and it ended up costing them. And unfortunately, it looks like the big losers are going to be Oregon State and Washington State.
You are a person who's negotiated a great many deals, and this is educational for me as much as anything. If I'm offered $30 million, even though I might think I'm worth 50, do I tell you that I'm worth 50 before, or do I throw that out and then see what happens? Because that's the rumor, is that they said they were worth 50, and then nobody ever, they never backed off that.
Click, like the phone went dead. Yeah.
Well, here's probably what happened based on my experience. And ESPN probably came in at 23 to 25 million and said, we want this package. We want it all. The Pac-12 networks will figure out, either we'll use them to produce, or we'll take it over. We'll do something with the Pac-12 network. And they probably negotiated up to a number in around 30. And then apparently some schools, economists who has some history in valuing sports rights, I have no idea who this individual is, but told their president, the president asked him to do a study, and he came up with 50 million. And so all this negotiating had gone on, and ESPN's probably thinking, okay, maybe we're going to end up at 32. We get them to the Big 12 number. Everybody's happy. Somebody comes in, and whether the commissioner and the consultant weren't able to talk the school presidents and chancellors back down to a more reasonable number, and we're just told going at 50. But you go in after negotiating with ESPN for a number of days and getting that number up from 24, 25 to 30 and plop down 50. The guys at ESPN are like, I'm starting to put my folders in my briefcase and getting up and getting ready to go, because you've already negotiated a fair amount of time, and then somebody comes and drops a 50 on you. You go, how? Even if we get to the middle, that's going to be 40 plus. We're not prepared to do that. So why go through the exercise and kind of the futile effort of trying to negotiate off a 50 number? So that then chases ESPN into the arms of the Big 12, because that deal was already being talked about. It was a number that was close by, very close. They only have 2/3 of it because Fox has the other third, as opposed to 100% in the Pac-12. So they, probably stop in Dallas on the way home from LA, on the way back to Bristol, and figure out the deal. And when you negotiate, you can't offend people by putting some number that's so bizarre out there that it just gets them to go, oh man, it's just not how the game's played. And I think that would certainly would have put me off if we've been negotiating and I had already gone up 5 or 6 million, and then they all of a sudden want 20 more. I just go, oh.
So we know what California, Stanford, and what they have and the money they have. And, of course, Stanford's athletic department's in debt. But what they bring to the table, we get it. It's still crazy because it's the West Coast and East Coast, but the Big Ten's now like that, and the Big 12 might as well be. When you were at Fox, and I know that during that time, the SMU was, of course, in the middle of trying to just have a football program because of all they went through. If you were a network executive today, SMU is willing to basically say, we're going to not take any money, however the real details are, for 7 years. They want a seat at the table before the table is closed. And so it appears as if they're not going to get much out of this at all. What would they bring to the table, in your opinion? They're in Dallas. Their stadium's pretty small. They don't have much of a crowd, but they're in Dallas. So what is the value? Is that the value there?
Well, yes. I mean, certainly from a TV standpoint, whether SMU gets in or not, that's not really TV's concern one way or another. If I was on the TV side, I'd be very happy to have them come in, because I think it's a good market. It's always a good football market. Anywhere in Texas is a good football market. So adding an SMU certainly isn't going to hurt you from a TV standpoint. I think for the other schools, it gives them an opportunity to probably recruit in there a little better shot than they have now, without having any teams, within a couple hours of there. So I think it's a win. I think, SMU has certainly got money behind it, and they can afford to not have to take distributions out of the media dollars. And I think SMU probably is very smart. Sees this as maybe a last opportunity, because we're now down to 4 power conferences, and this is probably their last opportunity to get into one for a number of years. And so I think on their part, it was a smart move. And like I said, certainly they've got the money and they can afford to do it. I think they now have to kind of start looking like Utah and put some more money into the building and more money into the other programs, and grow their athletic department in a manner consistent with not necessarily an AAC school, but a Power 5 school.
Will you be surprised if this falls through? Because it has had the 4 schools, whatever's been reported. Do you feel like they don't go to a vote? And I know that I'm not talking network, but networks are involved here. Do you feel like that it will go through? Do you feel like somehow someone's going to flip and these 3 schools somehow get in the ACC? And what happens if, in fact, they don't?
I think someone flips, and I think they get the votes, and I think it'll come out as though it was unanimous, because these votes usually come out that way. And I say that because I think with the the money that ESPN apparently has to pay, and the number's around $72 million, and it's the fact that SMU is taking zero, and that Stanford and Cal probably taking $10 million apiece. Then you've got probably some travel costs. That money will get spread around. But at the end of the day, you're going to end up with $50 million extra, and that $50 million is enough if you start applying it against the incentive-based conference championship football game, basketball game, men's basketball game, maybe women's basketball game, and then also some number of it that will just be divided by 14, the current membership. And I think there's enough there that it will get somebody to flip their vote. Is it going to put all the talk at the ACC about people bolting to rest? Not necessarily, but I think it will do something for some period of time to maybe lower the rhetoric a little bit.
Last thing, if you don't mind, Bob, former president of Fox Sports, has been with us many times the last couple of years since realignment crazy started. If, in fact, you were Oregon State and Washington State, what is the difference, in your opinion, other than location? Which power or group of five conference to you is juicier, the AAC or the Mountain West?
I would say the Mountain West, primarily just from a travel standpoint. I think they fit in with that conference a lot better. I think that Gloria knows how to operate a conference and will do the best thing for Oregon, would present the best opportunity for Oregon State and Washington State. The question is going to be the structure. Is it a reverse merger? Is it a buy? Are they going to buy their way in? Is it a full merger? Somebody going to dissolve? There's a lot of intricacies to trying to pull this deal off because of where the various assets sit at different conferences. And I think there's some value in the Pac-12 name, and maybe and the Mountain West has some great markets too, and is really Pacific and mountain in nature. So I think from that standpoint, that's the best fit. AAC's got some great schools as well. I just think Oregon State, Washington State would be a little bit out on an island, but clearly there's going to be a lot of other schools on islands as well. So I guess maybe that doesn't matter, but I just really think the Mountain West is probably the better fit in some form of a hookup.
Thank you very much for your time, as always, Bob, and the insight, history, lessons, and also the experience of where you've been. Thank you so much. Bob Thompson, former Fox Sports president with us, who's helped break down many things along the way the last couple of years.
I'm glad I got to learn